I guess the way we can kick this off, let's actually introduce ourselves because I think a lot of us haven't really met each other. So what's up, guys? I'm Chris, also known as Pwyff. I manage a lot of the communications we do at Riot Games.
I'm Socrates. I'm a lead designer on League. I worked on like hex tech crafting. I work on the ranked systems, and I was lead on New Champ Select.
I'm GBay99. I'm a YouTuber, streamer, and avid player of Ranked.
My name's Lobster, and I'm the lead developer for Dynamic Ranked and other kind of matchmaking systems.
I'm Scarra. I'm an ex-League of Legends pro, and right now I just stream and I make analysis as well as content, and I play a lot of solo queue as well.
I'm going to kick this discussion off with basically confirming a couple facts. A, we've talked about this a lot, but we're not going to be bringing back solo queue, and what we're trying to focus on for this season is a lot of improvements at the high elo and basically role selection, I think, and competitive integrity, trying to ensure fair matches. So we're going to talk about all that stuff in this roundtable right now. Thoughts?
Did you guys always know that you were not going to bring back solo queue and then just sort of tacked it on like, we might bring back solo queue to try and make dynamic queue an easier pill for the community to swallow?
No, I think the original plan was that we wanted to make rank better, and we thought Dynamic Queue would do it. The response that we're going to bring solo queue back wasn't like a well-thought-out plan.
We just discovered new data. It's one of those things where it's really hard to like have a fully transparent conversation with players because you're like, there are cases like this where you're like, oh, based on the state of the world today, this is what we're going to do. And then tomorrow, the state of the world changes, and you're like, well, I can't like do the thing I promised if it's going to destroy the game. So now I have to like eat crow for, is that the right?
I have a question then. So yeah, there was a long time where Riot essentially didn't say anything about solo queue, and everyone kept guessing. You know, it was like, are they going to do it? Are they going to do that? Are they going to do this? Like, it's not coming back. It's not coming back, right? It's not coming back. Oh, it might come. No, it's not coming back. Like the thing is, it's like what happened to like transparency?
Yeah, to be honest, we did a terrible job at all of the communication, and it wasn't any evil genius plan. It was basically like for the engineers who kind of were aware of the problems the system had, we were like, hey, give us some time and we're gonna like go try to fix some of these problems. And then we had different members of the team coming in and different people jumping into the conversation, and not everyone had all the same information. And we basically just did a bad job because instead of telling players, one, it's like, hey, we don't have all the answers, so stay tuned, and then like saying that until we figured it out, we basically made promises or we made statements of, here, we're gonna build this. And then we went and looked at it and we're like, shit, we can't build that, or it's not gonna work. I'm kind of interested, like, what your guys' experiences have been playing Dynamic Queue. I know that
It's awful. Like,
yeah, so let's hear about it.
I mean, I'm serious. At my elo range, I think a matchmaking service should have a couple key things. So one, it should help me find skilled players around my level. Two, it should be quick, essentially, like the game should be relatively fast. I don't want to be waiting in queue for upwards of 50 minutes that I've done like in this current system. And three, I should be able to play what I want to play. Like if I'm gonna switch from solo queue to dynamic queue and they're gonna enforce roles, I should be able to enforce the role that I want to play. And I think on all three levels, the matchmaking system has failed.
So I think the way you framed it is actually pretty much perfect in terms of the way we look at how matchmaking works. You're making really one trade-off of time for quality. So if we can find you a perfect match instantly, that's ideal. And then the longer you have to wait in queue, the more relaxed we are about how good a match we can make. And that's just like fundamentally how a matchmaking system operates. And I think you're right that we kind of missed the ball on both time and quality.
Yeah, I think that there's two problem sets that we should separate clearly when we're arguing about this stuff. The first one is like high MMR has its own set of sort of challenges.
Absolutely.
And like right now, matchmaking quality is like legitimately not good for high MMR, which causes inaccuracy in standings. So like the way that we're moving forward and addressing those problems is different than the rest of the ladder, right?
So I do want to speak to that because like there's the goal we set out to do, which is give you more control about playing with your friends, more control about what position you play, and matchmaking time and quality are supposed to be as good as before. And like frankly, we just fucked that up. So matchmaking times aren't as fast as they're supposed to be for top tier players. Match quality isn't good enough for top players right now. And what that comes down to, I think, is one, I think it's worth telling everyone that, and two, we got to talk about how we intend to fix that stuff.
Yeah, and so to be really specific about it, like the frequency with which high MMR players have to play against pre-mages is much higher, like on the order of like 10x everyone else. And the match quality of those games is significantly worse. So like, well, and it makes sense, right? Like if you think about trying to find a good match for SKT versus trying to find a good match for like 5 random bronze players, it's like, oh, I can find a good match for those guys, I know. But once you get out to the sort of fringes of that distribution, it's just much more difficult to do.
Yeah, and high low, like the times between, I think, is it 8 p.m. or 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. is like terror hour. You would always run into 5-man LCS stacks, 3-man LCS stacks. But the thing is, it's like I don't even mind the pre-made so much. It's like when I play normally, just like in the afternoon, I'm not playing against any LCS players. They're all scrimming, and so are the challenger players. So I'm playing, but the problem is the skill gap is so wide because I think to some extent they're not playing. So I have to play against. I think the worst thing I ever played against was like a gold, like a platinum player with like 4 diamond 4 players. And I look at the enemy team, it's like, oh, okay, well, that guy's an LCS. Like there's 3 people who are like really high challenger. And it's like that matchmaking system, I look at that and I'm just like, my team needs to be playing significantly better than their average to be able to stand a chance.
Yep. No, that's totally fair. And like so we're addressing that in a couple ways. So the first thing is matchmaking times, right? And like when we first sat down and looked at the state of things after we launched it, we're just like, hey, these matchmaking times are like shit for high MMR players. Let's try to address that with algorithmic changes. So basically like the system we're using now, the way we like form teams with people is different than the old system, just sort of like fundamentally, right? And then there's the position slicing, the pre-made slicing. So first what we did is we just looked at that and we're just like, can we just optimize this? And we did some optimization. So at launch we had like, it was like 30-minute queue times for like players who are in like master tier, right? Which is terrible. So we launched a few fixes. We got down to like 17 minutes. And now we're kind of at the point where we've like done all the optimization we can without making other sacrifices. It's not the algorithm itself, it's the slices that we've added to this that make matchmaking times worse and also make matchmaking quality worse.
By slices, you're saying like the role selection.
Yeah, so like bucketing, like matchmaking, essentially the more like buckets you use to like compartmentalize matchmaking, the more sort of like trades you make in terms of like quality and queue times and those kind of things. So we're at the point where like we can't give players at that MMR their positions all the time, and so we're looking at options that are like after a certain amount of time we're more open about giving you other roles or like picking a larger number of roles, for example like pick 5 and those kind of things to solve the matchmaking queue time problem.
Let's say you're saying queue times, match quality, role selection. If you could get one of them really good, one of them pretty good, and one of them you'd have to give up something on.
Oh God, I guess you'd give up role selection because you guys are like committed to giving up role selection. So it's like at that point, it's like okay, you know. I'd say like at some point after you play a certain amount of off roles, the system should prioritize your main role more and more.
Right.
But aside from that fix, I think queue times and skill players are both equally important.
Jim, I'm curious, what for you at least, what would your 3 priorities would be?
I might put role selection as the highest priority because that feels like a very, it kind of depends on how you look at League of Legends, because if you look at League of Legends as something that if you need to be a good player, then you have to own every element of the game and know every element of the game, then you should be able to give up your role selection. Right. But at the same time, if we are giving up our role selection, then we're just back to the old system. We're back to the exact same old system where it doesn't feel like much has changed.
I want to like frame the like problems and solutions that we're thinking about though, like a little more formally. So okay, match times for high MMR players, problem. The solution we're looking at is being less strict about position priority, and we're confident that will bring match times back to where they were before. So that's the first trade we're making, right? Next thing is match quality for high MMR players. And so the solution we're looking at there is enforcing for only high MMR players pre-made 3s, because we know we can make good quality matches out of pre-made 3s.
3s means 1s, 2s, and 3s, by the way, right?
Yes, 1, 2, 3 pre-mades for, it'll be high MMR. We're still determining exactly where the cut's gonna be.
Okay. We have high elo players, right? And they're hitting pretty much a ton of problems. You've been playing, I guess, like, what rank around are you right now?
I'm around upper platinum at the moment.
Okay, so I'm like that, but I tell everyone I'm diamond.
You and me both.
Yeah. But do you kind of like run into the same issues? Just before we get to like, I think a lot of these ones, like do you run into the same issues with queue times, role selection, or anything of that sort?
I think role selection isn't something that's the biggest issue, at least at the lower ratings. I think the thing about the lower ratings that's really frustrating about dynamic queue is the fact that it feels like it kills the competitiveness of League. The thing about solo queue that was so great was that everyone was always on a level playing field, and if you achieved a certain rating, that meant you got to that rating based off of your skill, and a lot of people feel like dynamic queue diminishes that.
So let me ask though, if you have good matches, do you see a problem with being evenly matched up against a pre-made team?
I don't. The problem that I have is that ranked is supposed to be a system where you measure your skill, and it doesn't feel as though it doesn't feel like throwing solo players in against people that are playing as fives just in the same queuing system accurately measures everyone's skill. And that's the big issue that I and a lot of other solo players seem to have.
When you say fair match, by the way, like what do you like define that almost?
Yeah, so when we think of a fair match, it's literally the teams have equal chance of winning. So if we match 5 solos up and we know that based on their skill level, they have an equal chance to beat a 5-man pre-made, I'm comfortable with that match because they have an equal chance. So basically we can adjust the fact that you're playing with a team. Now, the system also tries to get 5s to compete with 5s first, but you can't do that forever because you might be sitting on your ass for a half hour waiting for that other team. My thoughts on that are like, there's always teamwork going to be had whether it's somebody that you're pre-mating with or not.
Yeah.
And so we're just trying to offer the opportunity for players who want to also pre-made their ranked experience. And ideally we make those matchups fair so you have an equal chance to win that game.
It's about the meaning of the standings, right? It's like when I look at that score, what does that score mean? And in a perfect solo world, that score means like something. And in a dynamic world, that score means something else that is more along the lines of teamwork.
I think for a lot of solo queue players, what you're talking about, like the undermining of competitive integrity in some ways, because if you queue up as a solo player and there are dudes queuing up as 5 and climbing, your skills as an individual carry are kind of undermined. And are we adjusting for that? Are we like trying to make it easier?
Our ability to find 2 teams that are right next to each other, you're not going to be able to do that all the time. So then the second order is, okay, well now we have to start matching, a pre-made 5 with solos and duos and trios. And basically the way we look at that is you get some advantage of playing with your friends or, pre-mating. So we can offset the matchmaking to say, okay, you're going to play against slightly more skilled solos to balance that out. I think we can do a good job at giving people fair matches quickly with position selection, 99%. At top tier, it's pretty much shit right now, and we got to fix it. The 2 things we have to address are, do we patch it for top tier? It's easier to just like put a Band-Aid on it and say, okay, now the top tier players have a better experience, but then it can look really odd. You're like, hey, I'm a solo queue hero, or let's say I'm a pre-made hero up through high plat, and then we have this cutoff where like, hey, you can't play 5s anymore. It'd be really awkward as a player growing and getting stronger that the way they got there in terms of their competitive experience suddenly gets turned off for the sake of these like weird back-end details. But on the other hand, we have to address the fact that we don't have the queue times and the quality we want.
We sometimes have to make specific solutions for just the 1%. And if you look at like how we addressed the rank system historically, like we have done that, right? Like Master Tier has a different set of rules, and we changed that from like season 1 to season 3 to season 4, right? So like we have to ad hoc a lot of those solutions.
Yeah, I think at the highest level of play, like find it very rare that people play 5-man queues at the highest level of play. Like outside of like people on challenger teams, like they're just looking for like competition, but a lot of times they're just looking for like LP. Like they just want to play. Like I think if you bring back a more competitive environment, people don't mind playing solo queue. Like of course people want to play pre-made, but I think limiting it to like 3 or 2 is like, I guess the old solo queue system. It's like fine for high tier. Like no one really complained in that system.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to, I guess, switch the conversation. You're talking a little bit about the undermining, I guess, of the solo queue player. Just wanted to like kind of restate that and get back to that discussion point. We're talking about like that trade-off that we made there, and I want you to kind of like highlight.
Yeah, you don't have to want to go pro in League of Legends to want to play it competitively. You want to, maybe some player just wants to get to gold and just wants to get the end of season rewards and get whatever new skin or whatever end of season reward there is. And the community doesn't have all the statistics that you guys have for saying like, oh, well, we know that 99% of players haven't moved that much since the introduction of the Dynamik queue system, but all you have to have is, one silver player that gets to gold quicker than you do because he starts queuing with a pre-made 5, and then you feel like crap because you can't get to gold because you're trying really hard to learn everything about the game on your own, and it's a lot of work when you can just go and try and find a pre-made 5 to group with.
I think the challenge we have is that we kind of institutionalized the expectation that ranked was a certain way. We changed the meaning of ranked from stricter personal evaluation to teamwork as a larger component of it. And I think that's what people are responding to, right? Is they're just like, oh, the meaning of it has changed. We acknowledge personal evaluation has not been well handled. So as a team, we're exploring how do we do a better job of just capturing personal evaluation that is not solo queue.
I'm just really curious about what are the gains then? Let's flip it. You're talking about how Dynamik queue, let's say for top tier play is pretty much And let's see how we can figure that out in terms of like iterative improvements and then system changes. But
You mean like how is dynamic queue better than solo queue?
yeah, just like that's what I'm kind of curious about. A lot of people talk about this. They're like, I had a great experience climbing solo queue. You've now given me dynamic queue. Let's say from plat down, like for guys like me.
Yeah.
Why?
There's a few big slices. So like match quality in terms of a number of vectors, but like probably the one of the most important player facing ones is just like sort of in-game harassment is lower now than it was in normals before. It is so much better. It is like astronomical. Like we never thought we could get it that low. And so I think when you look at like the League of Legends and people go like, yeah, like toxic solo queue or whatever, it's like, well, yeah, of course it was, because we like put you into like a super stressful environment with like 5 random people with like conflicting ideas of what they wanted, and we're like, yeah, go figure it out. It was terrible, right? So like when we look at that, right, and we look at like engagement, we look at like fairness, we look at this enormous suite of like metrics, right? And we're gonna try to share some of those with the community so you guys can see those too. We're just like, hey, this is like objectively way better. But the one thing that is not better is the meaningful piece, right? And so we're committed to fixing that.
Those data points, you're talking engagement, you're talking fairness. Break them down for me. Give me what that actually means. Normals versus ranked. What was it before and what is it now?
Historically, ranked has been at least twice as bad in terms of toxicity than normals. What we've seen is like all the ways we measure how people treat each other in game look better than normal queues after the release. And again, we're talking about for like the 99 out of 100 players who are the largest population of League players. We have more players playing ranked than have ever played ranked before, which is also really satisfying because we got feedback all the time that says, I want to play ranked, can't do ranked 5s because I can never get 5 people together, roster management's not useful, and then so my options are I can solo queue, or else
is that
play
contextual
normals.
based off of like audience growth, or is it just like raw numbers?
No, raw numbers. So like, yeah.
Okay.
In terms of like, you consider the same size population.
Right.
More people are playing ranked.
Okay.
It makes sense.
In percentage.
A lot of people agree that toxicity is a lot lower right now than it was in the old solo queue system, but a lot of people believe that it is much lower because they get their roles, because you don't have to fight over mid lane and have everyone calling mid, and then one guy eventually gets mid and then doesn't do so hot, and all the other people that wanted mid started flaming him. A lot of people think that's the big reason that toxicity is down, and not necessarily just because they can queue with friends and then people are just so much more cohesive that no one ever fights.
It's both those things. Yes, exactly. Those were our 2 bets, is that giving people control over their position makes it more fun and less angry, and then playing with your friends is also more fun and less angry, just based on
Have we proven those? Have we split them?
Yeah, so there's 2 ways to slice it, right? So first of all, you can just look at normal draft, and you can see the drop in normal draft versus the old version, and then you basically map that back to as a percentage of the ranked drop, and it's significantly more as the first piece. The second piece is you can look at pre-made size to essentially like harassment and like quality metrics, and like 5s are strictly better, 4s are strictly better, 3s are strictly better, like each of those, because like there's 3 people on my team who I'm on the same page with. And also like it just if you just think about it intuitively, or like I'm going into my promos and like that jerk like fed, right? Versus like, oh, my 5 homies are with me. Like I'm not as likely to have an argument.
So my only question on this is like, okay, so let's limit everything to at least or up to 3. So high MMR, let's say master is up to 3. So does that mean that the overall quality of the games will be better?
Yeah, some of this gets into the secret sauce that we can't talk as openly about, but I can tell you right now, like we have 3 features lined up, and it is our first priority to implement them, and they're supposed to fix those problems. It helps when you have smaller premates, because when SKTQs, you can't get a good match. So limiting a number of premates makes it easier for us to make a good match. And 2, there's just some work we haven't got to yet, because when we model, we'll run like hundreds of thousands of players through the system in a test environment, and then we measure like our quality metrics. On the average, those things look solid, and that's what we kind of tune and dial for release. When we went out, we didn't know it would be this bad for rank. So all we've been doing for the last 3 months is trying to fix it, basically, and we haven't fixed it yet.
This is like a general, like, experience you run into when designing stuff. You're like, oh, we're going to design the system and simulate it this way, and then you put it in the wild, and players act really differently. Like for example, like the exact specifics of roles of like the roles they select and things may not line up to what we have in the simulation, which causes starvation issues and stuff like that. Which I think what you're getting at.
So basically, by conceding the 2 things that we want to give players, which are premades and position selection, we have to see how much of that we have to reduce to get your time and quality back.
So more likely the time is going to reduce with this trio queue, right? So does that mean that you can make a more pointed role selection?
You want one role, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I want one
Well,
role.
of course, yeah.
So that's just not happening,
It's
right?
not. So like, did you play Team Builder? So the original Team Builder had this problem where like, the way I always like represent this to people is like, imagine you've got 5 jars and you're filling each of these jars with marbles at different rates. Okay. So like it's like drop, drop, drop. This one's dropping really slow. Once you get a marble in each jar, you take a marble out. Okay. What happens in 5 minutes?
A jar overflows.
Exactly, right? So like that's why we have pick 2, because like if we did pick 1, you'd get a lot of mids and you'd get like no supports, and this guy would never find a match. So like taking the marbles out of the jar is where you find a match. So like you just have a bunch of mids who never get into matches.
Okay.
And that was a starvation
And I
issue with
understand
Team
that, but are there going to be any more algorithm changes to maybe make it so that you can get your main role more, especially if you play multiple off roles? So there's a lot of situations where it's legit like I see jungles or I see mid lanes play off role 7 times in a row. And it doesn't seem like there's any algorithm changes to make them pick their primary role.
There's 2 things. By introducing positions, we created those buckets, which makes the match times worse, right? The queue times get longer. Second, the way we optimize giving you your primary is pretty naive right now. It's not good enough. And so we actually are working on improving that too. The hard part is the longer you wait, the more the system has to say, well damn, we can guarantee you mid, sure, but now instead of waiting 15 minutes, you might have to wait 30 because there's so many players who want mid. So like the trade-off is, if you really want it, you're gonna have to wait because there aren't enough players taking the less popular roles. So that's really the trade-off. And right now we look at match times and quality and say, those aren't good enough, so we're gonna have to give up something, and it's probably gonna have to be position select.
We have a number of ideas that we're confident will fix the queue time problem that basically come at the trade of some position agency. And by position agency, I mean ability to pick exactly what you want. So we're confident like we'll get it to the place where like times are good and you have more selection, you have more control over the position you're going to get than before, but not as much as you do now. I think that's a TLDR.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I want to get to the last point, which is essentially what you guys are talking about is like you're prioritizing match quality, like fairness. Like that is it fair to say like that's the #1 priority top to bottom?
Yeah, I would actually say that the way you put it, Scarra, is best. Time and quality have to be about evenly.
And then you'll figure out role selection.
The top priority.
And
You're saying of those 2 things? Yeah, I consider like getting into quickly into a match that's shitty is not a great.
Right.
Yeah, and in fact, we did that. I think one of your posts was you like fighting against some plat players, or maybe you got paired with them. That happened actually when we said, hey, let's use this really aggressive knob. We made a change to the system. Yeah, and the goal was so.
Wait, with just Scarra?
It was like at that specific time, I never had that happen before where I played with like a platinum
So
player.
let me try to frame it well. So again, the trade-off is the longer you wait, the more relaxed we have to be about quality. Right. So perfect situation is, so we can give you an instant match and you can play with bronzes in 0 seconds.
Okay.
That doesn't feel good.
No.
We could also make you wait for 9 months until 9 other players hit exactly your match made rating. So we're somewhere in between that. Right. And so what we have are, how fast the system is willing to give you less quality matches. So our effort was, hey, match times are shit. Let's tune one of these dials that says, be willing to make matches faster. Okay. And suddenly we saw plats, and we said, oops, we overdid it. And then we had to pull that one back.
Last words, anything, you just want to like, you can do that.
I don't know, do you feel like you got a chance to argue your points?
Yeah.
Do you feel resolution? Do you hate us more or less?
Well, I'm glad you did this. I mean, I feel like it's healthier to hear you guys say this. It feels like a lot of people out there really feel as though Riot is a little shady about like how they treat certain issues like solo queue or like this when they don't just come out and say that, hey, we want to make the rank system so much more oriented around team play that we're willing to give up solo queue and give up individual, or give up something that's been a way that people have met.
We want solo players to have an equal chance of winning all their games, and we haven't been there yet with Dynamic Ranked, and we'll try to get there. But the expression, I accomplished this as a solo queue player, is something we have to solve for, and we don't have that answer yet. But I think that we can improve the quality of games we make with solos and premates. So we want people playing premates because we know that people have more fun premating. We're all pretty core league players that play a lot, and we want to give people the chance to play ranked with friends because we heard that request over and over again. And in the meantime, we kind of shit on, hey, I'm a solo queue player and that's how I express. I mean, to be honest, like I never duo queued. Like my ranked experience has always been solo, like hundreds and hundreds of games. And so the goal was not to take that away. It was to offer this new thing, which is you can also rank with friends.
I think this is really important. And then at least from my end, the follow-up is going to be super important. So like, again, like you haven't completely sold me. I'm not convinced. So in a month, if what happens is nothing changes and there's no response, you guys have a problem. Even if it comes to an answer where everyone hates, if they can understand the reasoning behind it, it's like at least they can point to that and be like, the reasoning is faulty. That's not a problem. Like that's fine. That's much better than the original thing, which is like,
Everything's fine.
Everything's faulty.
What I hope we can do is better acknowledge when we've got a problem. Like part of it is when people say, hey, I hate getting queued up as a solo against pre-mades because I get beat and it feels shitty. Like I hope we are better about acknowledging, hey guys, actually we're optimizing the system and right now that, that was a true statement for X number of days or weeks or hours. Because then it validates the fact that, yeah, it feels that way and it's shitty and we know and we're gonna do something about it.
Yep. At least with the introduction to Dynamic Queue, we shifted what it means to compete in League of Legends. Did we make that trade-off willingly? Are we willing to stand by that?
Totally. I mean, that's the world we're in today, right? So I think we acknowledge like there is a hit we took to personal evaluation that like we're not happy with and we want to solve, right? But the meaning of ranked in League of Legends includes team play, and that's the world we're in, and that's the world that we're going to stand behind. The places where it's like, at high MMR, where like shit breaks down, it's like, well, without fair games, you can't have meaningful standings. And that's where the spotlight has been, right? It's people like, hey, look at that, it's fucked up. And we're like, yeah, the reason it's fucked up is because they don't have fair matches. And so we're gonna fix those problems and we're gonna get it to a world where we can have both.